Mundane Astrology for this year by 6 astrologers. Presented to the Astrological Society of North Texas by Steefen, Campbell, Astrologer, March 14th, 2020. Mundane astrology is the branch of astrology dealing with the events of geographical regions, places, countries, and the whole world, as opposed to individual astrology. Astrologer Stephen Campbell is delivering his look at the year and has obtained approval from the president of the Organization for Professional Astrology, OPA, to share videotaped mundane astrological readings for this year, prepared for OPA members by a panel of astrologers before the start of 2020. The role of astrology is to better understand what is going on so we can be prepared to navigate these currents to the most productive outcome. The Organization for Professional Astrology, OPA, advances the cause of professional astrology by helping students and practicing astrologers get the information, insights, and experiences they need to foster their understanding of astrology and launch and enhance their development as students or practitioners. We focus on making astrology accessible, credible, and sustainable. In practice, this means celebrating astrology's diversity, making good quality content available to members, elevating standards of practice, and providing guidance for those who choose to practice professionally, sustain themselves financially. OPA membership for 1 year is $60. 3 years is $150. Lifetime membership is $550. And 1 year membership for members of the Association for Young Astrologers is $40. The Association for Young Astrologers, AYA, is an organization dedicated to providing educational and networking opportunities for those interested in astrology, with a focus on young people, those new to the field, and aspiring professionals. A 1 year membership to AYA is $20. Roy Gillette, Astrologer. Pluto in tropical Capricorn, November 27th, 2008 to November 20th, 2024. What has happened when Pluto was in Capricorn? 1515 to 1544 Common Era. 1. The Reformation. 2. Dissolution of monasteries in England. 3. The first circumnavigation of the world. 4. The expansion of Islam into Eastern Europe, India, and further east. 5. The publication of On the Revolution of Heavenly Bodies by Copernicus. It was the beginning of modern humanity, as opposed to being a victim of belief culture. It was liberation from spiritual dominance. 1762 to 1792 Common Era. 1. The rapid expansion of colonialism and industrialization, leading to a radical upheaval in the way the world, and particularly societies within nations, did business with each other. 2. American and French revolutions. 3. European nations, led by Britain, mapped and recorded the world for assets to exploit. Out of all this, today's capitalism was born. When there are many planets in Capricorn, expect the stock market to reverse. We build up to 5 planets in Capricorn in January, a massive number of planets in Capricorn. So expect consolidation in the markets. If it does not, and it did not, when the behavior of humanity tries to bulk against the push of the planetary energy, then you get it even worse later on. And we did. Your arms are too short to box with God. This will be a very destructive year, or a constructive year depending on how well people work together. But would you bet on that? A constructive year depending on how well people cooperate with integrity. Christine Skinner, Astrologer. Discussing financial prospects for 2020. Saturn and Pluto are in conjunction November 2019 through the end of 2020. November and December 2019, that conjunction is strengthened by a vertical conjunction, a parallel aspect by declination at negative 22 degrees or 22 degrees south. The primary investment for 2020 is in friendships. Have a good network. Something terrible might be around the corner. May 13th to June 24th, Venus is going to go retrograde in Gemini, a commercial sign of the zodiac in financial astrology. Uranus was in Aries, on and off, May 2010 to March 2019, making it a time for entrepreneurship. With Mars going through Aries starting in June, people may be forced into entrepreneurship. With the high unemployment today, 22 million unemployed, some people may have already been forced into entrepreneurship. Mind you, in this recession, depression, early career entrepreneurs and all entrepreneurs are having challenging times. People are going to be bruised at the beginning of the year. Jack Gillen, an astrologer, chose a New York Stock Exchange chart of May 17th, 1792, 8:52 a.m. in New York, New York. It came into being with Jupiter retrograde, 22 degrees, conjunct Neptune retrograde, 27 degrees, both in Libra, house 4, in exchange for making money. But no, they were opposed to Saturn at 26 degrees Aries in house 10, and Mars at 18 degrees Virgo. On November 24th, 2019, Uranus was at Taurus 3 degrees. Taurus is in polarity with Scorpio, and Mars was at 3 degrees Scorpio. Hence, a Mars-Uranus opposition. Markets go up into a Mars-Uranus opposition, then they fall back. We had this geocentrically, Earth as center of perspective, but not heliocentrically, Sun as center of perspective. Well, a fall in the stock market is anticipated, given this rule of financial astrology. The market is going to do well at the end of November 2019, but humans will try to hang on to that market direction, but it will be delaying the inevitable. Corporations had their stock buybacks to keep the market up, but that was only delaying the inevitable. If the market continues to go up beyond the lunar eclipse of January 10th, and it did, I have misgivings that a correction is going to happen, and it did. Worse than had corporations not artificially kept the market afloat. The June 21st eclipse could be when U.S. debt comes home to roost. In October 2019, U.S. corporate debt was 47% of GDP, nearly 50%. In November 2019, the following month, more than 50% of that debt had lower, medium, S&P and Fitch investment grades, one level above junk bonds. Given the shutdown of the economy, corporations likely will not be able to service this debt in order to hold their credit ratings. The BBB-, lower medium grade rated bonds are at risk of falling out of investment grade. Mars Chiron is a financial corrector. Mars conjoins Chiron July 13th, 2020, so expect a correction then. On December 21st, 2020, at the end of the year, Jupiter and Saturn will be in Aquarius, with Vesta in Virgo opposing Neptune in Pisces, meaning we can expect a currency crisis or a debt crisis then. In financial astrology, we can look at the stock market, but we can also look at gold, silver, and even Bitcoin. Let's look at silver, which is used in medical instruments and used for healing. Viruses are underground, unseen, underworld, so Pluto has to be examined. During an epidemic or worse, a pandemic, healthcare workers are at risk to catch viruses from patients. So the wounded healer, Chiron, has to be examined. Looking at a chart for the silver exchange, the silver market, Pluto and Chiron are a fifth of a circle apart in February 2020. 1/5 of a circle would be 360 degrees divided by 5 equals 72 degrees, or two 30-degree wedges plus 12 degrees. In February 2003, when there was the SARS epidemic, Pluto-Chiron were closer than in February 2020. But for February 2020, I am expecting a pandemic. Wednesday, March 11th, 2020, 1 month after the expected pandemic, the World Health Organization declared today the outbreak of a global pandemic. The number of coronavirus cases around the world totaled more than 100,000. In the U.S. alone, more than 1,000 cases have been confirmed. This increase in cases added to fears of a global economic slowdown and have increased calls for government intervention. Bitcoin should be erratic. Do not play with trading this currency. Invest in you. Invest in friendships. Stephen Campbell, Astrologer, using for background information, the Mundane astrology book Cosmos and Psyche by Richard Tarnas, Astrologer. In the Mundane astrology book Cosmos and Psyche, the author, Richard Tarnas, looks at 4 planetary pairs: Jupiter-Uranus, Saturn-Pluto, Uranus-Neptune, and Uranus-Pluto. I opened my astrology software, Solifire, and looked at the transits for each month of this year, and all months showed a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. This is the planetary pair for which the content in the Rick Tarnas book will be relevant for this year and this presentation. Saturn is the traditional ruler of Capricorn and Aquarius. it is in domicile in these two signs. Jupiter is the traditional ruler of Sagittarius. It is in domicile in that sign. It is in fall, debilitated in Capricorn. Saturn-Pluto conjunctions by month throughout 2020 as per tropical and sidereal charts. Saturn is in traditional domicile in Capricorn or Aquarius all 12 months, given the tropical charts. And it is in domicile 11 months, February through December, given the sidereal charts. When Jupiter joins the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in the tropical chart, it is in fall, debilitated. So it will not be energized to rescue us from the perils of Saturn-Pluto. In the sidereal chart, Jupiter is more helpful with more months in its domicile of Sagittarius. Saturn-Pluto conjunction. This is a period of intensified tension and constraint. Societal structures decay and break down, so there will be room to build new forms and foundational elements. Do not focus on external achievement because that will not be in sync with the hidden nature energy of Pluto. The Saturn-Pluto combination brings the gravity of graveyards. We see this now with the inability and lack of capacity to bury the dead. In Italy, in New York City, one desperate situation was the piling up of 17 bodies in a small morgue of a New Jersey nursing home which had run out of body bags. The Saturn-Pluto conjunction also brings necessary confrontations with cultural and personal issues we can no longer deny or resist, be it the culture of private insurance, the lack of universal health care, or the personal issue of not having medical and long-term care insurance to fully cover what we must face. Pluto amplifies the contraction of Saturn, separating the essential from the non-essential in the face of obstruction, honing our awareness of whatever we wish to determinately develop with the limited time and space available to us. Saturn-Pluto conjunctions. August 1913 to June 1916, within 15 degrees. Within 1 degree, October 1914 to May 1915. June 1946 to September 1948, within 15 degrees. Within just 1 degree, July to August 1947. December 1980 to October 1984, within 15 degrees. Within just 1 degree, October 1982 to July 1983. And January 2018 to December 2021, within 15 degrees. December 2019 to January 2020, within just 1 degree. The first Saturn-Pluto conjunction of the 20th century coincided with the start of World War I, July 28, 1914. The second Saturn-Pluto conjunction of the 20th century, 1946 to 48, coincided with the March 12, 1947, Truman Doctrine to contain the Soviet Union, a mark for the beginning of the Cold War. Modern terrorism is considered to have begun in 1946 with the bombing of the King David Hotel. Also of note during this conjunction was the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi, January 30th, 1948. The third Saturn-Pluto conjunction of the last century, 1980 to 84, coincided with the President of the United States calling the Soviet Union an evil empire, March 8th, 1983, in the context of an elevated arms race. Saturn-Pluto conjunctions. This conjunction devastated Europe with 30 Years' War that started in 1618. This conjunction devastated Europe earlier, 1348 to 51, with the plague called the Black Death. Within the December 2019 to January 2020 Saturn-Pluto conjunction, we have the coronavirus pandemic, and some independent journalists see a hybrid Cold War between the United States and China. The correlation of the Saturn-Pluto cycle with genocide, ethnocide, and mass killings is striking. It included the mass killings of Armenians by Ottoman Turks during the conjunction of 1914 to 1915. The deaths of millions in the aftermath of the Gandhi assassination at the end of the conjunction of 1946 to 1948, and the death squads in El Salvador and Guatemala during the conjunction of 1981 to 1984. George Orwell wrote the classic novel 1984, his dark vision of totalitarian oppression and control during the Saturn-Pluto conjunction of 1946 to 48. But he placed it in the time of the next Saturn-Pluto conjunction, 1980 to 84. Totalitarianism is a political system marked by an extremely high degree of control over public and private life. Today, we have been confined to our homes due to the pandemic, and there is the probability that civil liberties will be lost to the need to get pandemic vaccines and/or immunity certificates to re-enter public life, or the surveillance method of microchipping humans, or having smartphone contact tracer applications to monitor possible infection paths from possible public contacts. Lynn Bell, astrologer. Mars retrogrades. September 9th, 28 degrees Aries to November 13th, 15 degrees Aries. Shadow period July 24th, 2020 to January 2nd, 2021. I sense forces moving against the homeland. The hero Beowulf is archetypal Aries. A good movie for this archetype is Beowulf and Grendel. Mars in Aries activates courage. Someone has to confront the monster. Are we overwhelmed? Get friends. Heroes have to come forward, or your inner hero has to be sure before coming forward. Mirror Mars retrograde 6 years prior, 1935 for 1941, and 2014 for 2020. But let's look at Mars retrograde 1941. Berlin, Pearl Harbor, mayhem, violence, and much death. There's a tendency for power to concentrate. Let's look at Israel 1973. Let's look at oil sales. There was an embargo, an official ban on trade or other commercial activity with a particular country. Recently, there was the oil problem caused by Saudi Arabia and Russia not cutting production, driving down the price of oil. The last time I bought gas, I bought it at $1.30, far from the $2 to $3 plus prices per gallon of before. The Watergate scandal and the impeachment process for Richard Nixon. Underdog takes power. World economy crashes. 1988, end of Iran-Iraq war. First computer virus. New forms of warfare emerging. 2014, Boko Haram. That's that Mars retrograde mirror, 6 years before the current Mars retrograde. There may be a war in Africa. From a psychological view, take on your anxiety and fears. Mars is the young force coming up, challenging entrenched power, but a retrograde pauses forward momentum. The Democratic Convention will not produce a strong enough challenge to the entrenched power of the Republicans. On November 3rd, Election Day, Mars will still be retrograde. The challenge to entrenched power will likely not be strong enough. Christos Arcos, Astrologer. While there were the Saturn-Pluto conjunction cycles of the 20th century, we live in big cycles, and the astrologer can look at Saturn-Pluto conjunction cycles starting in Capricorn and returning to Capricorn. January 1518 was the last time there was a Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn, 2 months after Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the church door, which began the Protestant Reformation. That was 502 years ago, a 502-year cycle. We live in big cycles. The current Saturn-Pluto conjunction has environmental threats, and it will bring fears and difficulties. The biggest dangers in 2020 are 1. Losing our democratic principles, and 2. Problems with international relations. The Babylonians thought the winter solstice was the important chart, but today we use the spring equinox, Thursday, March 19th, 2020. At that time, we will deal with Saturnian influences. Saturn will be in conjunction with the Moon, Mars, Jupiter, and Pluto, and it will square Uranus. Around the globe, we will no longer believe that capitalism is going to heal itself or solve its problems. The United States will have a tragic situation that reveals the problems of capitalism. We are going to have severe financial problems at the spring equinox. Things are going to go badly in 2020. The Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in the air sign of Aquarius, December 19th, 2020, will be a time of renaissance. Cooperation and only cooperation will be the renaissance. Human nature and how we see ourselves will have changed at that time. Thank you. In this presentation, we focused on the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. Now let's get descriptions of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction and the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction. Description of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, the Great Conjunction. When Jupiter and Saturn come together, there is both the intensity of old forms dying, as well as the fertility of new growth beginning to take shape. Together, Jupiter and Saturn combine expansive and imaginative vision with the structure and discipline needed to both manifest results as well as strip away the inessential. While Jupiter signifies generosity and fortunate opportunities, it can also lead to egoic greed and delusions of grandeur that requires the contemplative focus of Saturn to trim the excess and strengthen what is ready to ripen. We need the inspirational revitalization of Jupiter to mediate the negative side of Saturn that can bring fear over limitations and obstacles and lead to depressive stagnation. Description of the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction. We can expect an initial narrative of the changes coinciding with Jupiter's union with Pluto to be generated in April, with an important turn of events or necessary revisioning occurring in June and July that will require integration and contemplation for how to proceed more effectively. By the time we reach November, we will have learned how to adjust to whatever developments that have occurred earlier in the year. Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto, transiting through tropical Capricorn, will bring lessons of maturity and responsibility cultivated through acceptance of natural cycles of change. Aspirations need to be adjusted to contend with the limitations we face in regard to material resources and available time and space. The difficulties or crises we endure will bring revisioning of what needs to be nurtured and developed and what needs to be shed and let go. Thank you.